APA writing style. You might be wondering what it is and what do you do with it. This is a style of writing that was developed by the American Psychological Association. It's used a great deal in the social sciences, and so consequently it's used in colleges and social science classes a great deal. It sets standards for writing, which allows the writer to have credibility because it tells you exactly what to do in order to cite your sources and to show that you know what you're talking about. And hopefully you do know what you're talking about. This is also a style of writing that's used in professional journals, and if you're a college student, it makes your professors very happy. Now today in 2012 we're using the 6th edition of this style of writing. So if you find older versions, those will be wrong. You'll need to find the latest version, and the whole name of it is the Publication Manual of the American Psychological Association, 6th edition, published in 2009. And so make sure when you go to the library or go online looking for sources that you get the latest version. Here's some APA basics. Always double space your paper. Use Times New Roman size 12 font. Have 1-inch margins all the way around your paper. Indent each paragraph about 1 inch. And now there's no extra space between paragraphs, and if you're using a recent Microsoft Word program, it's going to want to give you that extra space, so you have to go into where it says paragraph, find the checkbox to fix that, and make sure you get that taken out of there. You will also have a header, you'll use headings, you'll include citations, and you'll provide a list of references at the end. Okay, you might already be wondering, what is all that stuff? So let's take it step by step. A header. What that means is that you're going to put the title of your paper outside of the top margin. And when you do that, when you do a header, then it appears on every page of your paper. So it's a real nice way to remind the reader, especially if you did a real long research paper, remind the reader constantly of what this is all about. Now that's different from a heading. A heading is within the body of your paper, and that introduces each different section, each part of your paper. And there are a number of levels in APA of headings. And so especially if you're new to this style of writing, just concentrate on the first few for now, the first few levels. And so basically it works like this. Level 1 introduces the main sections of your paper. And then level 2 introduces points beyond each section, and level 3 subsequent points beyond that, as you can see. And there's a certain way to write each one of these levels of headings. So it looks like this. Level 1 headings, your main headings that introduce the main parts of your paper, are always bold, and you have capital letters on each big word. Now level 2 looks just like that, except it's flush with that left-hand margin. So it looks the same, but it's moved over. And level 3, there aren't all the capital letters, and there's a period at the end, and it's indented the same as a paragraph. So what I always recommend is that you make an outline and start with a template, an outline of your paper that is very basic. Put that header up there. On the first page you'll repeat the full title of your paper, and then have 3 main parts to your paper: an introduction, a body to your paper, the main part of the paper, and then a conclusion. Now notice that each of those 3 main parts are level 1 headings, and so you won't have other things that are level 1. Now you may want to give a name to your introduction. You might call it something else. The body of your paper, make sure you give that a name as well. Seems like every time I say this, somebody calls it body of paper. And then your conclusion. So now that you've got an outline, some thoughts of what it is that you want to do, it helps you slip in the pieces of information that you have, and it also helps you decide in that main section of the paper what are other points that you want to make, and how is it that you want to divide those out. So you'll have some level 2 headings, and under that you'll have some level 3 headings as well. If you start with an outline like this, it'll make your writing so much easier. So here's an example with an actual title, The Role of Pop Culture in Learning. And you'll notice how that outline looks. First, the level 1 headings, the 3 main parts, and then parse it out underneath that. And now the writing is much easier. Putting information in the spots where they need to go is much easier to do. Citations. Citations are always used within your paper. To cite is to give credit to the source of your information, and so that means that you always must tell where you got your information, whether you're paraphrasing someone, using someone else's general idea, or using a direct quote of theirs. In all of those situations, you always cite. Now, a general citation includes the author, the last name of the author, and the year that the information was published. If you use a direct quotation, then you also give a page or paragraph number. And so the first time in a paragraph that you cite someone, that you mention a person's name where you got your information, and you've got their last name, and in parentheses you've got the year that that information was published, you don't have to cite that person again. If you're still talking about their general ideas throughout that paragraph, you're okay. You don't have to give their name and date again unless you interrupt their ideas with someone else's ideas and you cite that person. Now if you go back to the original person's ideas, you have to cite them again. Another thing that is something that you want to remember is that if you cite within a paragraph, the next paragraph, even if you're talking about the same person, you've got to cite again. You've got to have that last name and that year there. And so in a general citation, and this is one where you're not using a direct quote, you're not using quotation marks, it's just someone's general ideas, you're paraphrasing what they say, you will always use the last name and the year in one way or another. So here's an example. There are 3 sentences, all correctly written, but you'll notice that every one of them in one way or another has the name of the person and the year in which the information was published. And so you can see there are a variety of ways to do this. You can do the short way, the quick way. You can make it a little bit longer by writing it within a sentence, but you do have some options here as long as you always include those 2 parts. Now if you're using a direct quote where it's appropriate to use quotation marks, you're saying exactly what another person said. There's another piece to this, and that is you always give the page or paragraph number. Paragraph number probably if you're getting it online and there is no page number. So once again, you'll notice there are different options. There are ways that you can do this, but always the quote, the actual words the person said, those words are never changed, and you always include that page or paragraph number. Now, there are other ways to cite too. Sometimes you have a quote within a quote. Sometimes you have a long quote. Try not to have too many of those in your paper. You end up just plagiarizing. But let's say you do have something that's about 40 words. I wouldn't use much more than 40 words. But it's 40 words. You use what we call a block quote, and there's some special rules for that. It's done differently. What if you find something that you really want to use and you've searched and searched and you just can't find the author or the date? Then there are some ways that you can get that done, although you're going to make every effort to find out who said what to give them the appropriate credit so you're not plagiarizing. Or what if you did a personal interview? You talked to someone and don't quite know, it wasn't published anywhere, you're just talking. How do you get that done? And electronic sources are a little bit difficult also, but there are ways to do all of that. So the best source for finding out all of those details comes from a website with Purdue University's online writing lab, commonly called OWL. I strongly recommend that you go to this website to look for the details for all the different things that you have to do when you're writing a paper. So, rather than trying to learn all of these APA rules all at once and trying to take all of this in, because it is a bit daunting, as you're writing and you come across one question, you don't know what to do, look up that one thing. Take it one piece at a time. That'll make it a lot easier on you. So there is more. You need to include a title page that has your name on it. The OWL website will show you how to do that. Whatever you do, please make sure your name is always on your paper. Your instructor, if you're writing for a class, may also ask for an abstract. And that's a short description of your paper. You can see how to do that. And you will always include a reference list. So there's more to do. Now, I'm going to talk here for a minute about reference lists, so you may want to take a little breather, take a little break, because there is a lot to this. Your reference list is called references. It isn't called bibliography, works cited, what I read over the summer. It's called references. It includes all of the sources you cited in your paper. So if something is cited in your paper, it must be included on the reference list. And nothing goes on the reference list that is not cited in your paper. So always make sure you're cross-referencing to make sure you've got that done, that they're in both places. You put this list in alphabetical order by the author's last name. And even though you only use the author's last name within the body of the paper, within your paper, in the references, you use the first two initials along with that last name. Now, sometimes that's hard to find. If you can't find it, go with what you've got. Do the best you can, because that used to not be required, so it wasn't always included, and it's sometimes hard to find. In this list, you use what's called a hanging indent format. And that means that the first line is flush with the left margin, and other lines are indented. It looks like this. That first line is flush with the margin, but if it goes to a second line, that line is indented. So it's just the opposite of the way you'd write a paragraph in your paper. And so what happens is the first line sort of hangs out over the subsequent lines in this case. Look this over and look at how references are written. So it's the author's last name, the first two initials, the year in which the material was published. And then in the first case here is the title of a book, the place of publication, and then the publisher. Notice the title of the book, for reasons that I don't know, that only the first word is capitalized. And so there's some rules about capitalization that you'll have to learn and pay very special attention to. And then you'll also notice as you go down, there's an example of an article, the Encyclopedia Britannica, and notice that there's some italics in some of these things too. So how do you figure out what goes where? Well, capital letters are used only in the titles on the first word and in proper nouns, and then after a colon. Italics are used for the biggest part of the source. So here's how that works. Let's say there's an article in a journal. You don't italicize the name of the article, you italicize the name of the journal. That's the bigger part. And so pay attention to that. That can get a little bit tricky sometimes, but you'll need to know how that works. ND means no date. That means that you don't know when something was published. So there are a lot more reference rules. There are many, many more APA rules. When in doubt, go to that excellent OWL website. That's your best source. Now, I know this is a lot to take in all at once. I know it can be a bit challenging at times, but you can do it. So I hope you enjoy.